everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Adoption. I'm Heather, and Kim is here with me, and today we're happy you're joining us for another discussion on hope in adoption. And today we're talking directly to waiting families, families who are in the adoption process and are waiting to adopt, whether you're waiting to be chosen or matched with a child. It's kind of one of those in-between spaces. It's, you've said that big yes to adoption, and now you're learning how to kind of live inside of a season that may not be predictable, and you may feel like you're unable to plan or even kind of control what's going on right now. This is kind of that waiting place.
Yeah, and December, let's talk about it and how December can make that wait feel heavier or brighter, and sometimes both on the same day. And you might notice that hope feels more tender right now. And if that's you, that is completely normal. So this episode is for your heart and your head. And we're going to talk about what hope really looks like during the wait and what you can do practically to stay grounded and how to move through the holidays without feeling overwhelmed, how to keep your hope steady, real, and present. So let's dive in.
I think a good place to start might be redefining hope in a series of waiting, reframing it. I know we've heard from families who may say, or maybe they just feel things like, I know I should feel hopeful, but it's hard staying hopeful every day. And here's the truth. Hope isn't a feeling you maintain. It's not something you strive for or you plan for. Hope really is more of the type of posture you return to. You know, you can have, let's say you can have a hard week, whether it's stressful, busy, you know, tough in any number of ways. You can have a hard week, but still be hopeful. You can feel maybe discouragement in the waiting, and still be on track. You can be frustrated. You can be challenged with that lack of control and still be going through this season, this process beautifully and hopefully.
Heather, the word posture, I was thinking about that today and I was thinking like maybe we should comment what's your heart and mind posture as you come into this
Mm.
podcast episode, listening to this encouragement. Just recognize that. And if you're not already there, try to posture yourself in an open and receiving way, knowing that you're here for a reason, listening to this for a reason. And though you may feel discouraged, we're here to help you get the tools you need to remain hopeful.
Mhm.
And I love, Heather, how you're saying about, we can feel discouraged, we can have a hard week, but a lot of that comes from comparison.
Right.
What are, like, if we're not doing enough, compared to what? If you're doing something, you're doing it right. So
Right.
I want to say, especially right now, with so much more on our plates, it is easy to feel discouraged because we're feeling like we're not doing enough.
Mhm.
But what is that bar? Who sets that bar? Anyways, hope in adoption is not just smile and wait. Hope is active. It is staying engaged, listening to this podcast. It is staying open, your mind, your heart, being flexible, having that partnership with your adoption professional, and staying willing to take the next small step. One of the biggest misconceptions families have is thinking hope means you're never shaken, right? Much like faith, it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
it's never a little wobbly sometimes. That's all why it's called hope, why it's called faith. But most families who match are people who held hope with shaky hands at times.
Right. And that's all of that, Kim, is so true. And, you know, wherever you're at in that waiting process, you may be in a place where hope, it feels quieter or smaller or maybe even fragile. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean you've lost hope. Even if it feels like your hope is shrinking, it doesn't mean that it is shrinking. It means that you're human, and it can be a challenge to stay hopeful, especially if that hope might be defined as anxiously waiting. Our bodies aren't made to stay in this anxious anticipation over long periods of time. That takes
Mm,
so much energy, takes so much out of it. And just because you don't feel that anxious anticipation, that is not hope. Hope, it doesn't disappear in long waits. It actually can deepen if, we're able to, um, you know, kind of feed it what it needs, remind our hope that there is more to come. And in that waiting season, you know, I think real hope often looks like more of a quiet strength, not performance, not comparison, not perfection. And definitely, I love that you said the word pretending. It's not pretending.
mm-hmm. And if you're listening thinking, but we've been waiting a long time, we see that.
Hmm.
And Heather and I have been working with adoptive families for a long, long time.
Hmm.
And we have supported families in long, short, and unexpected waits. And none of it is wasted. And hope doesn't disappear in long waits, it deepens. Your hope can mature. You can nurture it, like Heather said, nurture your hope. And it becomes something steadier than the timeline. The timeline in adoption, if you're working with an ethical adoption professional, it's not something that's in anyone's control because it's going to take a birth mom choosing you, right?
Hmm.
And I want to remind you that when it's been a long time, and when you've done everything, God still sees you. We talk in our world a lot, social media and conversations, and people have shirts and mugs that say, I see you or I feel seen. But I just want to remind you, in case you forgot, God sees you. God sees you at all times. He is omnipresent. He is omniscient. He sees every hurt and heartbreak that you have been through, and He knows all. And He is here taking care of you, and you are cradled in His hand. So let that bolster you in those moments when hope feels hard.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's awesome, Kim. And I think it's another good reminder that this waiting time can be a place where families of faith, or maybe families that don't feel they have a particularly strong faith, can deepen that faith too by
Mm,
going to that well, by learning more. The wait in adoption, sometimes people say it changes you. I don't know that it changes you, but I think it often gives you the opportunity to grow in ways that perhaps you didn't choose, and maybe in ways you wouldn't choose, because it can stretch your patience in ways you didn't think your patience could stretch. It could change your expectations. Sometimes we hear from families coming into adoption that say, well, we didn't think we would have to wait long. Well, when you're relying on a birth mother choosing you, if that's your path to adoption, the wait is until you're chosen. And
mm,
that can be impossible to predict.
mhm,
You may find your vision of what your family will look like has changed, especially if you came into adoption holding tightly to a timeline that then you learned you can't control, and definitely control. That's one of the places I think that families do find, um, they have to grow if that is something that they struggle with. I struggle with that. And when things are not in your control and you feel like you've done everything you can do, certainly that's the opportunity for growth and deepening your faith, deepening your reliance on God. And and it can be such a beautiful outcome, not just in obviously adopting a child, but also in that deepening of faith. There's a Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. Very popular gift book, especially for graduations and things like that. But one of the most interesting places in that book, it talks about a place of waiting where you come across people are waiting. They're waiting for this, waiting for that, waiting all kinds of things. And, you know, often I think we talk about the wait to adopt, the challenge of the wait to adopt, and really it's tied up in that loss of control, whether it is waiting for a birth mother, waiting for a social worker, waiting for, the process for an international adoption. There's so many different places where control escapes us. But as we go through the process, we do emerge more prepared to be a parent. We often learn flexibility in ways we didn't maybe think we had it in us. Humility certainly comes up. Perseverance is a huge one. Empathy. And I think the ability to make room for other people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest gifts adoptive parents often gain through the adoption wait is that learning and space to incorporate um, their child's story, their birth parent's story, even if you don't know it, in that preparation time.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes a moment like this, when you're waiting for something and the timing is not in your hands,
Hmm.
it grows you in ways you don't actually want to be grown.
Yes,
Like, it's
absolutely.
hard. It's hard and it can be hard and it can be painful.
Hmm.
Um, but that shows like that's where we need to be grown. If we're a little resistant, we need to target that. Wherever you're
Hmm.
resistant, that's where you need to focus and allow that growth to happen and lean into it. And part of leaning into that growth can be a change of mindset. When that thought comes into our mind that says, I can't believe I'm in this position. When is this going to be over? Why do I have to do this? And why is this happening to me? Your brain sinks down and down into the dumps when we talk to ourselves like that. And what you can change is, I get to wait. Waiting to be chosen or waiting for this process. When I've done everything I can already, when I've checked all the boxes, it's a privilege. It literally is a privilege. If you are home study ready, funded for your adoption, you found the right agency partner or whatever path to adoption you're on, what a privilege it is to be where you are. And there are many people, perhaps even listening to this podcast, that are doing their research, their preliminary steps into adoption and encountering some hurdles. And they would give anything to be in the spot you're in right now, where all you have to do is wait.
Right.
And waiting forms you into the parent that you're becoming, the parent that your child needs you to be. And sometimes that's the real work of the season. You're growing your capacity before your child arrives.
Hmm. And that, there's a Bible verse that talks about this, and really the perseverance is what came to mind when you were talking, and that's in Romans 5. And it talks about, we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering, in this case I would say waiting, produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope.
Mm-hmm.
And here we're back to that hope again. And I know we've both, Kim, seen families come out of this waiting season gentler, more present, um, more deeply connected to each other in their own relationship. There's really a strengthening that happens when you've walked through something difficult together. And certainly that's true in marriage. It's true in friendships. It's true in work relationships. And and so, you know, I think to be able to honor what the weight is doing in you, you have to acknowledge that the weight is doing something in you. It is changing you. And again, this verse about, produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. It's not passive. It's not empty space. It's formation, it's growth, it's preparation. And I loved what you said about how many people wish they were where you as a waiting parent are. And I think that's something else, Kim, that we don't talk about often is the the families that you and I both talk to who can't adopt or are hoping to adopt in the future. But, there are far more people who want to adopt than are able. I was talking to a wife just the other day whose husband had made some unfortunate choices as a younger man, and it is precluding them from being adoptive parents. And it's heartbreaking when something from your past comes up like that, but that's a reality. Um, so again, and and sometimes we talk to people who say, I mean, I remember I talked to another couple many years ago, and they shared with me that they were waiting to adopt, and they had been waiting for many years. And I just asked what adoption professional they were waiting with, and they told me, well, they weren't with an adoption professional. They had just talked to some different pastors in area churches and had made a profile and given them to the profile, and we're just waiting for one of the pastors really to refer a birth mother to them. And I had to gently explain to them that's not really actively waiting to adopt. That's certainly hoping and praying for a positive outcome, but you need things like a home study. You need some professional assistance in that. So, it's I just want to honor that if you are in the waiting process with an adoption professional, no matter the type of wait, you have already taken so many steps just to be where you are. And, sometimes we have to turn around and look at how far we've come to be able to honor that, yes, we've done a lot. We've done a lot to get here. And no, we're not at the end yet, but we're so much further than where we started. So, um, maybe we need to take a minute and look at practical ways. Well, what are some practical takeaways we could talk about today to stay steady during that time, to know that we're still on the right track, and also things we can do to keep that hope active, not abstract. And I think, one of the best ways I talk to families about waiting, this is primarily for a domestic placement, and that is if you have an adoption profile, an adoption website, something like that, something you can continue to do is actively updated. Think of it as tending a garden. You don't go out and rip up everything and replant constantly, but maybe you look at it and say, does this still sound like us today? Is our joy and hopefulness coming through? Are our pictures warm? Are they recent? Do they still look like us? Have we, changed hair color? Has my husband shaved his beard? Where are we at in that? Would an expectant mom connect with us? And sometimes those little shifts not only give us active hope, give us somewhere to kind of direct that energy, but also maybe bring some clarity and renew and refresh us.
hmm And, I think there's a lot of pressure on adoptive parents when it comes to how they're going to present themselves in their profile. But rest assured that the profile that touches that right birth mom that is going to place your baby into your arms and help you become mom and dad, it's not always the most polished, picture perfect dream catalog life. It's the one where you allowed your real life to show.
Mhm. Right. And I think a kind of a companion to that is take stock of what your preferences for a child are with honesty, with compassion, and and maybe with conversation. Maybe it's time to examine if you need to widen them. Maybe you feel like you're too wide and you want to narrow them. Really just ask, do these preferences still match the family we are becoming? And if you're unsure, that's a great opportunity to talk to your your adoption coordinator, your home study provider, just to learn more if you have questions, because you want to be sure that you are open to opportunities that are within what your capabilities are, um, without compromising, your calling in adoption.
Hmm. And preferences are so important to always revisit and address
Hmm.
and see how you can broaden. Another great way to navigate this time when you're trying to maintain your hope is to create communication touch points, and don't wait until you're overwhelmed.
Right.
A 10-minute quick check in with your coordinator can be so comforting and reset your entire mindset. Um, I think part of the comfort that comes with talking with your adoption professional is that she's speaking to you from a place of experience.
Hmm.
She's seen these stories like yours from beginning to middle to end over and over and over. And her faith in these stories going from beginning to middle to end, and right now you're probably in the middle if you're listening to this, you know, she's seen that those come to fruition and that everything that adoptive family is doing to get in the best position and just waiting now to be chosen,
Hmm.
that it all means something in the end when they are so ready to get that call. And when you talk with your coordinator, just, you know, maybe ask what they're seeing.
Hmm.
What are birth moms looking for right now? Are they seeing any trends emerging?
Hmm.
Maybe they have some feedback about profiles that you can mull over and think, would that be authentic to us to include something
Hmm.
like that? And you don't need answers, or it's not about demanding a status report. Again, your posture changes everything coming into a quick check in like that, and just say, I just wanted to have a quick call and just
Hmm.
find out what you're hearing, and be able to keep your thumb on the pulse of what's happening, because it's important to maintain that communication. I know, Heather, in the work that we do, we value communication. That's why we have check ins scheduled. We have webinars that are live twice a month for our families that we work with at Lifetime Adoption. That all helps them stay
Hmm.
plugged in and engaged and encouraged. But if your adoption professional doesn't offer that or can't offer that, let's say you're in the foster system and there's not a great deal of support for you, it's good to have something like that that maybe you initiate if possible. You
Hmm.
need that connection. You need to not be out there on your own.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think, I feel like, Kim, we're kind of talking to people struggling with hope, but we also want to acknowledge that, you know what, some people are wired and they do this waiting well.
Hmm.
And really, if that's you, awesome. Let us know, the rhythms you have in your life that support that, so we can help share that with others. Sometimes we suggest creating some type of routine, some type of rhythm that will support your mental, emotional health, that will maybe tamper down anxiety if that's something that's coming up. One of the hugest recommendations we make is, just going for a walk, whether it's by yourself, whether it's with a friend, whether you are listening to a podcast like this or music, just that walking can really help, no matter the source of your anxiety. It can really help kind of get that in check. Journaling, Bible study, those are two great ideas. A date night. Sometimes when we get mired down into routine, breaking that routine up and going and doing something different can really help with that. Just taking time to breathe, to relax, and especially through this season, that can be so important. I think it's good to remember that self-care is not optional, and especially in preparing to be a parent, the more self-care routines you build now, the better prepared you will be as a new parent. When self-care usually is on the last of your list when you are parenting, when you are a new parent with a little one or a child of any age. So, you know, if you feel like, yeah, that's a place I could build in a little bit of time and space for me or for us, definitely try to build that routine now while you're in that waiting season. And I will say, I'm going to broaden that a little more, not just, self-care like walking and date night. If there are things that you want to do that are going to be harder with a child, do them now. If you want to go on a cruise, do it now. That's something that, when you start having more children, can be tough to do. If there's a skill or a hobby you want to learn, if there's a home renovation on your someday list that you can afford and have time or space, do it now, because once your family grows, there is a time that you're not going to have the the time, the space, maybe even the awake hours to do that. Now is a great time. And I often encourage families to look and see if they feel like they're putting their life on hold while they're waiting to adopt, because that is something you don't want to do, because this is time that you don't get back. So use today, use this time. Don't put your life on hold. Live your life to the fullest now, keeping that hope that the day is coming that you will be adopting.
If adoption is on your heart, whether you're thinking about adopting or considering placing a baby, lifetimeadoption.com is a great place to begin. You'll find real life stories, answers to common questions, and resources that meet you right where you are. Most of all, you'll find a team that's compassionate, experienced, and ready to help you take the next step when you're ready. That's lifetimeadoption.com. When you feel that longing in your heart for what is yet to come, and you might find yourself feeling sad and bitter, flip it upside down.
Hmm.
Alchemize it into a prayer of gratitude and a prayer for the future.
Hmm.
In your mind and in your heart, that will change how your body is feeling. The things we do in our mind and our heart change how our body feels.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think, going along with that are stories. Look for stories that strengthen you, that build your hope. I know on adoptionwebinar.com, we have a lot of adoption stories in the past we've done. That can be a great source of
Mhm.
inspiration and hope. But, the internet is full of extremes, and you want to focus on the positive, because that will keep your mindset hopeful. There's plenty of negative out there, and unfortunately, that has an effect on mindset. It builds fear, it builds suspicion. Um, you want to gravitate to those real world adoption stories where people are doing and showing their best. Find stories that encourage. Find voices you trust. And that's one of the things, Kim, like I say, in adoptionwebinar.com, I think we have a lot of stories with adoptive parents who have told their stories that not only do you learn from, but it really grows and builds hope.
Mhm.
And you will, you know, find, um, you learn through their experiences. And you're learning about modern adoptions. You're learning about ethical adoption practice, because that's really, you know, kind of where that hope grows, when you have good, positive input feeding it.
Mhm. That's such great advice for any challenging season you're in, but especially for adoption because wow, does adoption horror stories make headlines, okay?
Hmm. Hmm.
All the thousands of people that are peacefully living their happy, joyful lives after adoption was successful, that doesn't make headlines. That's
Right.
just normal. So seek those out. And it's
Right.
okay to block out and put blinders on the negative things that may
Hmm.
surface when your algorithm realizes that you're looking to adopt.
Hmm.
Block those out and seek out the positive things. It really does help.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
you're creating what is the soundtrack of your life? What's the narration of your life? The things you listen to and the things that you pay attention to.
Right.
Make sure that those are positive, especially right now. And it's not saying we're not realistic and we're ignoring that sometimes things are negative. There are some hard things that people go through in adoption, but right now that's not what you need.
Hmm.
You need the positive things. You need the testimonials of things that worked out for people. And if they can say, I had doubts and I wondered if this was ever going to happen, and then it did, that's even a cherry on top because that might be where
Absolutely.
you are right now.
Right. So, knowing that now we are in a holiday season, we pulled together a few holiday tips that are great. But no, if you're listening to this not in December, these are good anytime. They are not specific to the month or the year that we're in right now. And one of the biggest kind of holiday family tips I like to share is, having on the ready kind of a holiday boundary statement, I like to
Mm,
call it, because people
mm,
often ask questions. They care about you, but they don't realize that, this may be a question that now you're hearing the sixth, seventh, eighth time, and not only is it exhausting to ask, to answer, when they say, oh, any news yet? And you're like, yeah, no. It can also feel kind of demoralizing to, have hopeful questions that, it's no. But having a great answer at the ready is wonderful. Something like, we're still in the adoption process. And you know what? When we have something to share, we will definitely let you know. Thank you for checking on us. We appreciate it. And maybe even add in there something like, if you want to help us, share our profile, give them a way to help you. Because often when friends or family are asking, they're asking because they're hopeful for you. And if they're hopeful for you, chances are they want to do something to help you see your family grow.
mhm. And having a response prepared for those inevitable questions, like don't let yourself be shocked when that moment comes that someone asks you about your adoption process.
Mhm.
Having a prepared answer, a prepared tactic or strategy helps you kind of step out and step out of those moments and
Mhm.
depressurize that moment a little bit without feeling like you're being rude or defensive. And I will add on to that, Heather, prepare your response in character, your
Right.
personality. If you are a funny person and you're a little bit sarcastic and witty sometimes, that can be part of the response you prepare. If
Right.
that's not you, it's going to seem out of character and feel weird to you, so don't do that.
Hmm.
But just be straightforward and to the point. When we have something to share, we will. Thank you for checking.
Absolutely. I think something else that's good to know is that many times people think or assume that December is must be a slower month for adoption. And
Mm.
to be honest, no, it's it's not. Babies are born every single month.
Hmm. That is one of the biggest myths, and we see movement every December. And we've talked about this on past programs,
Hmm.
Heather, over the years. Hospital calls, last minute situations, expectant moms that want stability before the new year, women who find clarity during the holidays. There's something about the holiday season, Christmas, that highlights what you want this life to look like for this baby and the reality that there is a distance between the reality and what you want this child to have. And I think that actually can increase activity on the birth mom side.
Hmm. Definitely. And I think it's good to know that it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be a baby during December, but it could be a match, could be a conversation, could be a connection. It happens every day of the year. It
Hmm.
doesn't turn off. But hope definitely is alive in December throughout the adoption triad. And with that too, I think it's important to give yourself permission to celebrate, even if maybe your holiday celebration doesn't look like what you were hoping it would. If you've been in the waiting process a while, you might have hoped that this Christmas would be different, that you would have adopted. And I'll tell you what, Kim, I've worked with families who started December feeling like, okay, we're going to go through another Christmas without a baby, only to have been matched or have a baby by Christmas. So, it can still happen, but give yourself permission to still celebrate. And maybe this Christmas doesn't look different. You don't have to go to the big family Christmas. You have permission to do something different. You're allowed to enjoy the season. You're allowed to create new memories. Maybe you want to do something completely different than what your traditional extended family Christmas has always been. You are allowed to be fully present. You're allowed to also carry that longing, but maybe you think, you know what? Maybe that longing will be different if I don't go to my mother-in-law's house where my three sisters-in-laws and all their new babies are. Maybe instead, you know, we're going to go to the coast. We're going to grab a plane and go somewhere new. We're going to go skiing. It's okay to do something different this year
Mm.
because you can love those family traditions. You can look forward to the family traditions, but you also can say, you know what? We're not there yet with a child. We're not in a place where we are, um, we'll say, having to go there to participate because we have a child. We want the child. This Christmas, we're going to do something different. That's okay too.
Hmm. And even if you opt out of those options, it's good to know you have options.
Ah, yeah.
Empowerment comes from being able to make those choices.
Hmm.
And, another thing that is empowering is knowing that you can mute and unfollow the things that are making it hard for you. If you are someone that, maybe comparison is the thing that kind of haunts you, just remember that social media is not the whole story. And comparing your weight to someone else's announcement can kind of be like a vampire, an energy vampire that can steal that emotional energy that you really need. And so instead, you can say, where can we create connection this week instead of comparison? Comparison feels, I'm going to say, kind of idle, and connection builds hope, and comparison erodes it.
Hmm. Absolutely. You know, we've talked about, and that's great, Kim. I love that idea about muting those conversations or stepping away. Maybe, maybe doing a social media fast for a week and see how that feels.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe you replace that. Maybe you replace that with something that helps ground you every week. We talked about building those routines of walking or date night. You can grow that into something like, uh, an activity that you do together. Volunteering is a great time of year to volunteer and give of your time. I know for me, sometimes when I'm struggling, what I can do the best for me is to do for someone else.
Mm.
Um, Maybe you go do something creative. Um, but often that waiting, that struggling to stay hopeful can feel heavier when our life is smaller. And certainly being on our phone, scrolling, whether we admit it or not, that does keep our life smaller. Whereas I think hope grows when our life expands, when it's getting a little bit larger.
Mm.
And that's just something to keep in mind.
I think that, you can choose if you are going to stay on social media and tap in to that, those positive stories, because on one
Hmm.
hand, Heather and I are telling you, listen to positive stories
Yeah,
and testimonials, and then on the other hand, we're like, mute them all. You don't need
right.
anyone to be compared to. But I think know yourself, right? And know that you
Right.
have those options. If you feel like when you see someone else's success, it inspires you. You see it as a catalog of what God can do in your life as well, and that them being blessed doesn't mean it takes anything away from the blessing that God has in store for you. If that is you, stay on there and be encouraged, right? The internet
Mhm.
can be a great tool for that. And it can allow us to tap into and plug into inspiration and energy and encouragement that we otherwise wouldn't have in our own four walls of our house.
Mhm.
But if you know yourself and that's hard for you, you got to make that decision to turn it off. And Heather, you had some other ideas too about things that can ground you, like organizing. I know that for me is really like I am so present when I'm organizing and just like listening to a podcast or something.
Mhm.
I love it.
Mhm. And that,
Hmm.
organizing, decluttering, those things often kind of go hand in hand. And if that's something you need to do, that's a great, you know, Kim loves it. That's a force for me. I love it once I'm doing it, but the getting started is tough. Um, so, just kind of evaluate what is this input doing to me? Is it causing my hope to grow? Is it causing my world to shrink and producing more anxiety? It's really has to do with kind of self-management, self-awareness. And I mentioned a story earlier about a family who had prepared for December. I just want to expand that a little bit because that just is sticking with me. They were I'm still connected to them on Facebook. Wonderful couple. Wonderful couple. They had waited quite a while. They hadn't had really any interest in them. And they were very faithful through the process. They did the things they needed to do. They were just a fabulous, faithful couple. And they had shared with us later after the adoption that they had settled in that they weren't going to adopt before December or before Christmas, and this was going to be another childless Christmas, but they were already looking forward to the next year, and they never lost hope. They stayed hopeful. And we had been working with a birth mother who chose them about a week or 10 days before Christmas. And the kicker was she was due on Christmas Day. And she talked to them and they all decided to match. And no sooner had they decided to match, they decided, you know what? It's winter, it's December. We need to get there. And it was a few states away for sure. And they got there, they were able to meet in person, and their son was born on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
And they maintain a beautiful open adoption. But here, we've talked, Kim, about hope doesn't, it can be challenged when we feel like we've lost control, when we can't plan. And certainly in adoption, we need to stay flexible. Eh, this was a couple who had not lost that hope. They were staying the course. They were right where they needed to be, but suddenly everything changed. And I can't tell you how many times I have made those calls to adoptive parents, and the first words out of their mouth is, "Oh my gosh, we didn't think this would happen." And it's like, that's what we're here, that's why we're in this process. Um, and often it's not that they didn't think the adoption would happen. It has to do more with the timing, whether it's the week before Christmas, whether it's, I've called families on Thanksgiving Day saying, I need you to travel. We have someone who just had a baby and she's chosen you. It can happen any day. And and really, I think one of the hardest things for waiting in adoption is we often expect that hope will somehow announce itself ahead of time. Like, don't worry, something good's coming. I can see it. And that's not the case. Hope often the fulfillment is often sudden. It's
Mhm.
often unexpected. It might feel quiet. Um, and it often may have come after a tough time, just because that's how it works. But I think one of the greatest things we can do is really in that preparation and knowing that it can happen at any time.
hmm And it's okay to, take a moment to grieve that expectation. We're talking a lot about all the things you should do and shouldn't do. And that can, in and of itself, be a lot of pressure too, right? Like, where's the win here? It's okay to, grieve that expectation a little bit and give yourself
Mhm,
grace. If you feel down, it's okay to feel that way a little bit, but just know that you are responsible for picking yourself back up and either having that call with a coordinator that can be reassuring, that conversation with your spouse on a date night.
mhm,
You're responsible for getting yourself out the door into the sunshine and taking those steps and breathing in that fresh air. So, yes, take those moments to grieve, but remind yourself not to stay there. And
right.
if you are grieving, some disappointment, it doesn't mean that you misplaced your hope. It means that the journey is still in motion. And remember, that's a privilege too. What a privileged position you are in to have your heart open for adoption to be a path that God can bring you a child to. If you're a married couple, that your spouse feels the same way, that, you know, his or her heart also is open to that. You're on the same page and you've taken the steps and all the things Heather was talking about earlier. And just remember, it's you're not a fool for hoping. I th-
Mhm,
I pick up on that sometimes with adoptive parents. Hope is a companion in the waiting. It's not a guarantee of the timing, and it's okay to let yourself feel that hope and be childlike in that, trusting God's going to take care of it.
mhm. So, if you're waiting this December, I think I think the overarching message that we really want you to hold on to is, you're allowed to be hopeful and tired at the same time.
Mhm.
You're allowed to be excited and a little bit cautious.
Mhm.
And you're allowed to enjoy your holidays however you want to enjoy them and still hope for what comes next. And your wait isn't a pause in your story, it isn't your life on hold. It's part of your story.
Mhm. And we're giving you permission to embrace that hope.
Mhm,
If you've been afraid to hope, or your hope, you got tired of hoping, it's a lot to carry. We hope we hope that this talk today helps, and your hope is what's going to carry you into that moment, that as long as you're staying the course, you're following the steps, inevitably everything is going to shift, and it will.
mhm. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us today for this kind of extended conversation. Um, if you're waiting this month, no, hey, we're with you. We see you.
Mhm.
We are very familiar with that place. I'm sure your coordinator or caseworker is with you too, and your story is still moving. It's
Mhm.
still moving forward. And if you need to pause and look back on how far you've come.
Mhm.
If you have feedback, we read everything that you share with us. You can send us a message at letstalkadoption.com. And we're so grateful for you listening today and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Adoption. If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, please visit letstalkadoption.com. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, take care and God bless.